Well, my friend, John Delony, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hey, thank you, Chris. It's an honor to be here.
You're welcome. Well, hey, John, today we're here to talk practically really about walking through anxiety and I would say developing coping strategies for massive change in everyday life. We're walking through a very crazy season as a globe right now. And so I want to just begin by asking you to give us a brain science overview of anxiety as a platform from which we can speak.
I think the best way to think about anxiety is this way. Your brain is always scanning your environment for threats at all times. And anxiety is just the fire alarm. It's just when your brain smells smoke, it sees smoke, it feels smoke, it remembers smoke, it sets that alarm off. And I think anxiety is a word that we often give way too much power to, as though it's something that comes upon us and lays on us like a blanket or a skin tone. And it's not. It's just a fire alarm. And I think it's important to remember that those things that, we say it triggers our alarm systems, they can be memories, they can be things in our physical environment, our psychological environment. They can come from anywhere. But really anxiety, from a brain science perspective, is just the body's alarm system that says, hey, something in our environment's not right.
Why do you think we overemphasize it then? Do you think, I'm looking through the lens of culture right now, and Enneagram's a hot topic, discovering identity, emotional health is a hot topic, and so there's a lot of time and conversation spent on anxiety. Where's the overemphasis in your opinion then? Because if it's just an alarm, I want to create that pivot for people.
I think we have really culturally lost any sort of broad vocabulary that we used to have to describe a range of human experiences. And we've pathologized everything. We've turned everything into a diagnostic, something that we can go get a label for, and then a prescription for, and then a insurance reimbursement for. And so I may say, I hit send on an email on Friday, and I may be fired on Monday because I shouldn't have sent it. I've got anxiety about that email. No, you don't. You got guilt, right? You've got shame. You may not have should have sent that. You've got apprehension, but you don't have what I would call anxiety. And we've just really compressed all of our emotions into anxiety and depression, right? That's pretty much the two things. And I can't tell you how many people over the last few years I've said, hey, your parents just got divorced. You don't have depression. You're sad, and that's normal, and you're supposed to be sad. Or right now, I've told people in my sphere the last couple of weeks, you don't have anxiety, you've got fear. The world literally stopped in a way that we didn't know imaginable. And this is scary. That's not anxiety disorder. That's not a pathology. That's true fear. It's scary times out there right now, right? So it's really reclaiming some of our language and giving ourselves permission to feel emotions and feelings and really give ourselves permission to be uncomfortable. We have a real problem with discomfort in our culture.
Yeah. So do you think we want to put labels on everything because even though it's negative, it may bring a sense of finality, closure, and comfort to the soul? In other words, if the door's still open for unanswered questions, that keeps us in a constant state of wondering.
I believe there's some value to naming the dragon, is what I like to say. Because now you have something you can go after, right? You can deal with, you can handle. So there is something about naming childhood trauma. There's something about naming childhood experiences that are hard, or workplace trauma, or relational trauma. Those things are critical.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to naming pathologies, when it comes to naming our current feelings and experiences, it's really us trying to create certainty in a world full of uncertainty. I think the Western world particularly has my wife and I were just talking about this yesterday, we've got no ability to live in uncertainty. And so we put certainty on our jobs, on our titles, on the colleges that we went to, on having a six-pack abs, whatever it may be. But we put certainty into these things, and we really don't have a psychology for it when it gets shook. And so for me personally, and I got bent over by anxiety. I just got laid low by anxiety for a long time.
Yeah.
It at the time felt good that I could say this was happening to me. And the problem I don't like about that saying is you have anxiety or suffering from anxiety is it takes away your autonomy to begin to take the steps, to take ownership of your thoughts and your actions, which really leads to not being trapped by anxiety anymore. If that makes Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. And even to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to even hear how it manifested in your life as sort of an example for people to go, oh, yes, this is anxiety. This is not, for goodness sake, a borderline personality disorder, or this is not me actually having clinical depression. This is an adverse circumstance hitting my life in an unforeseen time that's just scaring me. What did that look like for you?
For me, it was the way I describe it is I felt betrayed by my own body. And I went through a season where I would get an email from a particular person at work, and all of my alarm system in my body would go off. My heart would start racing, my stomach drops, and it would do it as though I was walking into a meeting that I was about to get fired from. But I wasn't about to get fired. Things were great, but my body was responding to this existential threat. Mm-hmm. And then I began trying to stop the threat, right? So you start avoiding conversations, and you start avoiding your emails, and then your brain says, it loops faster and faster, right? And so when you start avoiding those moments that make you anxious, instead of leaning into them, then it just makes your alarm sound louder, because your body says, oh, you're not hearing it, so and it begins to cripple you, right? Mm-hmm. And my moment was one of the chief roles I played at colleges and universities was responding to student situations and their family situations when there's some pretty heavy psychiatric stuff going on, some psychological issues. And I remember sitting in the rain in my garden at 2 or 3 in the morning looking for cracks in my foundation. And I remember just sitting up laughing, thinking, oh man, I'm one of those students that I used to go help, right? And that was a turning point for me that to head out and go get help and go take care of myself. And help for me, I got in a car, I drove several hours out of the way to a friend of mine that was an MD, and I walked into his office and I said, I think I'm losing my mind. I need you to sit there, I need you to listen to me. And he did. Sure. And he walked out of that with me together over the next several years, and it was a pretty remarkable turnaround for me personally.
Well, I know many people understand this, and even to your point, people understand the mind-body connection, but I don't think they understand how it plays out in everyday life. And so I'd love for you to walk us through what happens physiologically when we're in a constant state of fight or flight. In other words, thousands of years ago, we were running from saber-toothed tigers. Right. And every resource in our physiology was needed to stay alive. But that's not true anymore. Now we've got accountants that yell at us, or perhaps a significant other, or there's arguments, and there's fear about a virus, or there's economic fear. And when the adrenal system fires, it pulls on resources from our immune system, from our digestive system, from our higher brain system. Like, what happens long term, John, when we stay in a constant state of fight or flight, where the adrenal system is just going and going and going? Because it was never designed to do that.
It really cooks us from the inside out. I read an article this weekend by a scientist out of Rice University, and it was bold enough to say stress and lack of sleep and loneliness makes you more susceptible to COVID-19, period.
Say that again.
Stress, lack of sleep, and what did I just say? Stress, lack of sleep, and loneliness.
Wow.
Makes you more susceptible to COVID-19. And the thinking being, your body, like you said, your body is not designed to have the gas pedal on the floor at all times, and to have adrenaline and cortisol pulsing at all moments all the time. And over a short window, you're right, it got us away from the saber-toothed tiger, right? Mm-hmm. And it allowed us to get to higher ground or to hide, and then we couldn't see our threat anymore, and we were able to, right?
Yes.
And to sleep. And now we've got devices, and we've got screens, and we've got so much noise and so many voices coming at us from so many different angles that the trigger's going all the time. And so our alarms never have a chance to turn off. Mm-hmm. And then we face a moment like this that's this is a really big deal, right? So this is actually upon us. It's happening.
Yeah.
And in many ways, our brains are trying to figure out, is this real or not still, right? Is this just another practice run, or is this a for real situation?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Walk us through, because I don't want to leave this point too quickly, walk us through some coping steps that we can take to better position ourselves to be emotionally healthy. In other words, what I heard you say is if we're constantly stimulated by screens that are on, maybe the fix is we need to limit screen time, or we need to limit consumption of news. Before we move on, I want to walk the viewers and the listeners here today through some practical steps to hurdle this in a way that will actually impact their lives for the better.
You bet. I think it's important to note different people are on different spectrums here.
Okay.
So there was a moment in history where, here's how I like to describe it. Imagine the hot and cold on your shower. And if you have a leak coming out of the cold side and it starts shooting water all over your bathroom, the solution at first is to run out to the street and turn the water off to your house, right? And so you turn the hot water off as well. And so that's when I say joy and anxiety are on the same switch. And that's where, think of turning it off at the street. That's what medicine does. It just kills the whole machine, right? It turns all the water off to the house. But you can't live without running water forever, right? So at some point you've got to turn the water back on, and you've got to get in there and fix the actual cold water setting, right, or the hot water setting.
Right.
So, and so it's important to come back, and at some point you got to turn the water back on, right? And so, practically speaking, in what I can tell you is what I'm doing in my life is I'm really careful about the thoughts and the images that I allow into my head. So I'm pretty constrictive on who I listen to, who I'm taking advice from. There's plenty of research out there on the neurological inputs that some of these marketing companies are using to set off the alarms in our brain and really locks into some of these shows and screens. And so I'm pretty careful. I'm trying to limit myself to twice a day, sometime in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, just to make sure I'm plugged in, and then I'm out. And other than that, I really limit my consumption. And the other thing is loneliness and connection. Chris, I am a introvert from Texas. I so badly don't want this to be the truth, but we have to have other people. We've got to be connected to other people. And so that's what makes this situation we're in now, I think, such a remarkable challenge for us all. Is the best way I can help my neighbor is to lock myself away and be away from it, right? And that's really hard for me, that's hard for them. And so it's important to find ways to remain connected. And the more true connection, vulnerable connection you can have with somebody. And if you're anxious, that's really pushing into your anxiety. Letting yourself be known and letting yourself be heard through the alarm system. That's when your body starts to relax and say, okay, I'm safe. I'm with my people, right? And I'm okay.
Yeah.
There is one cure for anxiety, and that's other people. And so it's finding people that you feel safe with, you feel connected with, that you can get engaged with on a regular basis.
Is it that simple? The cure for anxiety is other people.
I wish it wasn't, but it is.
Why? Why?
I think we're social beings.
Why that metric?
I mean, you can go back however many thousands of years you want to go back, and when you got separated from your people, that meant you might not make it, right? That meant you were sleeping in the woods by yourself at night alone, and so you set off every alarm it had until you found your people again, and that was critical, right? And now we live in a time where we are transmitting information, so texting and emailing puts information in our head, but it's not connecting us. It hit me a couple of weeks ago that the person I text the most in the whole world is my wife. But I send her a lot of information, like, I love you, and I can't wait till I get home, and tell the kids I love them. But then when I would get home, I would assume all day I've told you 15 times via text that I love you. And so I may not say it as much at home once I got there. And so I was giving her information, but I wasn't connecting in a human-to-human way. And so over time, just as we looked around our culture, we've just kind of done this from one another. We communicate a lot, but we connect very, very little. And then if you've got trauma, that's what makes childhood trauma so insidious, is it really unplugs you from any sort of connection. And so that's where if you've got childhood trauma, if you've got things that have happened to you in your past, getting with a professional is really important, because you have to really teach your brain how to reconnect with people. And then you can head into what I would call those life-giving relationships and community.
Quick plug. You said the phrase, and it reminded me of a book Dr. John Maxwell wrote. It's called Everyone Communicates, Few Connect, and I think the principle sticks. John, I'm just curious on that note.
He stole that from me, by the way.
Did he? I figured.
He probably wrote the book when I was 7, so no, I don't think so.
I think it came out like 15 years ago or something like that.
Smart.
I have it somewhere.
He's wonderful.
He is. I want to stay on connecting for a moment, because if we know the power is in connection, and right now we're being told by the government to socially distance, to physically distance is really what the implication is. Can we still find connection? Like you and I are 500 miles apart, yet we're still connecting. We're having a meaningful conversation. Does it need to be physical, or can it be like this? I want to give people parameters and permission and empowerment, especially at this time in culture.
So the way I would answer that would be, sometimes I've got friends who will call me for nutrition advice, and they haven't had a salad in 7 or 8 years. And they would say, do I need to go all organic? I'm not paying for organic food. And I would tell them, dude, just have a salad, and we will get to the levels of cleanliness and clarity and nutritional value later, right? Yeah. So the way, with that same analogy, this sort of connection is the best we can do right now. Go for it. Do it all day long. I Skyped with my old college roommate's kids the other day, and dude, we laughed. It was silly. It was never as good as us being in the same house and hugging and having a good time and playing catch. But it's a great, great substitute right now. So what I would tell everybody is just have a salad. The other thing is just walking out in your neighborhood. I've seen more of my neighbors out walking or sitting in the front yard just because they're looking for human interaction. And I wave real big. My kids have picked it up, and they've started waving really big. So we're finding ways to connect in ways that I haven't in so long. But I've been telling my wife, I've been sleeping better than I have in weeks and weeks and weeks. And I have to believe, I don't have any empirical proof, but I have to believe that I'm being so overly intentional about connecting the last couple of weeks that it has to be paying physiological dividends too.
Yeah. John, it makes me think, when we were together in Nashville last October 2019, you talked about a book, and guys, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. If I'm not mistaken, the book is Why We Sleep, right?
That's right, by Matthew Walker. That's
yeah, it makes me think of that. John, I want to spend some time on grief, because I think one of the things, walking through the global issue we're all facing right now, amidst any other personal issue people may encounter, is when there's change, there's loss. When there's loss, there's grief, right? People right now are grieving what was the case in life, what was the case economically, what was the case even from a perspective of first world convenience. And one of those initial aspects of grief is shock. But when that adrenaline rush stops, after the shock wears off, a lot of people may slip into just a slump of, oh my gosh, what happened? And it may be manifesting in slight depression or just lack of motivation for life. I know that to be the case when I was grieving the loss of my mom. But I'd love to know, John, in this case socially, after the shock of this massive change wears off, how do we cope?
I think that's so individual. I think the most important thing is that people recognize this is coming, and they give themselves permission to grieve. And so often we want to get on to the next thing, or we're rushed. I gotta go start working at Kroger tomorrow because I gotta pay my rent. I gotta have groceries, right? So we jump into this thing. And so I think it's important to know a grieving cycle is here, and a grieving cycle is going to be coming, like you said, for what we've lost, what we thought was coming our way. And then we tend to have a sum zero game when it comes to grief, right? So my 10-year-old, he's turning 10 this weekend, and he had a birthday party planned. We were going to have some friends over, and they're not coming over.
Yeah.
And for a 10-year-old, he's sad. And I had another buddy whose elderly mom passed away this past weekend, and their funeral, they couldn't hug at the funeral. And they had to stand apart, and it was agonizing to hear about it. And so what's important for all of us is to not say, well, he's got it worse than. It's just to sit in it and say, where you happen to be is where you happen to be. And you are allowed to feel your feelings, and you're allowed to feel these emotions. And in fact, you have to feel them.
Yes.
And at the same time, if we just needed information to have a well society, I mean, we've got the internet. We don't need any more information, right? And so what I would tell everybody is we've done a great job of pumping our frontal lobes full of info. We've not done a good job of feeling things and doing things. And so if you start feeling depression clouds coming in, right, you can see over the horizon, they're headed my way.
Yeah.
That's really getting outside of your head and finding people to serve can really be a great serotonin booster and can really be a community booster. And then you start this engagement cycle, and then you start a solution cycle, and then all of a sudden you're off to the races. And so when I feel the heaviness coming on, that is a signal to me. My default setting is to isolate and to retreat and get by myself, which of course just invites that sucker in even faster.
Of course, yeah.
And so now I know when my friends call and say, "Hey, Delony, you want to watch the fights with us?" And I think I'd rather just go to bed at 9. I know that's not right, and so then I have to go. That's a rule that I've set for myself. I have to go.
Yeah.
Now in this time of social isolation, I make sure I'm talking to my wife every single day, being vulnerable with my kids. Hey guys, we're doing the best we can. We don't know what's going on. And then when I feel those suckers coming, I get my son Hank and I say, "Hey, we've got to go serve somebody today. What are we going to do?" And it may be going for a walk in the neighborhood to pick up trash, and we're getting a walk, we're getting sunshine, we're getting to wave at people, and we're helping the community. And it could be any number of other things, right? But leaning outside of your head and going and actually doing things is critical to keeping those dark clouds at bay.
That's really beneficial. So speaking of hard times, I think one of the things that keeps us trapped is a believed lie or a misconception. When we empower a believed lie, though it may not be true, it's true for us. And so I'd love to know from your perspective, what's one of the biggest misconceptions you believe people may have regarding how to navigate through hard times successfully?
The number one myth I would tell you, and this is coming from Chris, I worked in crisis response for years. Yeah. I've been in some wild situations and seen some really crazy, dark stuff. Mm-hmm. What I would tell you is the number one myth is that we don't have the fortitude to get through it, because we do. And people are incredibly resilient. We are incredibly strong. Our communities are incredibly bonded together. And we haven't seen that for the last 5 or 6 years with all of the social media bickering. And it's easy to hate people and to get gnarly when you're sitting on your couch eating Doritos and you're not taking care of your heart and your mind and your head, and you're just kind of in this loop-de-loop of it's your fault and it's always going to be like this, right? When things actually happen, you stand up and head out the front door to help your neighbor. You take on a whole new vision of the world. And I've just seen it over and over and over with people and their families and their communities responding after crisis. And so what I would tell you is, or your listeners is, the other day we had those tornadoes that ripped through Nashville.
Right, yeah.
And we were hearing about it. My son heard about it. And we had a friend of ours that lost everything, total loss of their house. And so I packed him up in the car and drove him over there because I wanted him, he'd been hearing about it. And God gave us 5 senses to process trauma. And so I wanted him to see it. I wanted him to smell it. But most importantly, I wanted him to see the legions of people with chainsaws that were just walking around handing food to people. People just had ice chests that were wheeling down the street with drinks in them. And so we helped our friend move out of his demolished house. And I kept pointing to my son saying, this is what can happen. So look at all the good people out there. And I just wanted to keep saying people are good, people are good. And so the number one myth is there's no light on the other side of whatever's coming for me. Like, I'm never going to eat again. I'm never going to laugh again. I'm never going to have joy. I'm never going to have a relationship again. And that's simply false. It's simply false. Most of the time, right? Most of the time.
Right. Yeah, right. Well, it makes me think then, too, that so if we're believing that myth, if we're stepping into that every day and going, yep, this is actually what I believe to be true despite what actually is true, I think it exacerbates a pain-pleasure motivation cycle in life, which stunts our growth emotionally. How do we stop that behavior?
I wish there was a magic pill, but you just have to stop that behavior. And it's as simple as that. You know, I remember one of my favorite comedians said he saw a sign on a pole, and it said, "Call me and ask me how I lost weight." So he called it, and the person said, "Diet and exercise," and then just hung up, right? Yeah. And there's a $1 trillion industry around diet and exercise and losing weight. But the reality is you decide today I'm going to serve somebody. And today I'm going to journal about the feelings that I'm having. And today I'm going to go look for work because I just got laid off. Or I think I'm going to get furloughed, and so I'm going to pick up a second job driving. I'm going to start doing taking some of these action steps. They're going to put me in a position to be successful, even if it's marginally successful, even if it's just treading water successful. You are still making a step towards contributing to yourself and to your community. But there's not magic. You just got to go do it.
Gotcha. I know one of the things that you talk so well upon is trauma, and I think about through the lens of my own life, trauma keeps me living in the past. I'm living through what happened, what didn't work. But then fear and even shame projects into the future. And in both cases, I'm never living in the present. So I'd love to know from your professional experience, like, how do we stop projecting into the future with fear and instead center ourselves right today in the present? It reminds me of kind of like the story Jesus told about the house built upon the rock versus house built on the sand. When the rains came, when the winds blew, the house didn't topple over. I think the house is us, and it requires being present. Simple question then. How do we stay present?
And I would actually say that in my life, the house is not me. The house is my community. And so I tell Dave all the time, Dave Ramsey's got his baby steps with money.
Yeah.
Him and I have talked, and I said, your community is your emergency fund. It's not when someone's going to get cancer or when your house is going to fall apart or when you're going to have an emergency financially. It's going to happen. There is no guarantee then your life's going to have some challenges to it. And that's when having a group of people becomes your net, right? That's your trampoline bottom for life, is that you've got people there to pick you up, bring you a casserole, bring you a glass of wine, or just to listen to you complain and say, you can go do this, right? And so the house upon which you build that in tough times, in good times, is there for when things are bad, right? I exercise for the days that I might get sick, and then my body's strong enough to fight those off, right? Or we exercise, professional athletes work out really hard so they can perform a game plan. And so it's a matter of I've got to take care of myself and my heart and mind. I got to eat right, and I got to focus on positive things, and I've got to have a strong daily routine, and I've got to have people in my life that I'm connected to, so that when things fall apart, which they will, I can handle that when it comes, right?
When it comes, folks, I really want you to pay attention to what John just said. It's not a matter of if. Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble, but he said, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. And John, I just think it's that. It reminds me of the analogy of pushing against a 2,000-pound rock. And, that's adversity in life. We're all going to face adversity, but unbeknownst to us, the push against the seemingly unmoving 2,000-pound rock yields muscles. And folks, what I want to say to you watching us on YouTube, listening to this on the podcast, is that we need muscles. Our world needs muscles of perseverance and character and endurance, and people who are going to stand up in the midst of trouble and say, listen, I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to back down because I haven't seen the end of the story, and in the end we win. And John, I don't mean for that to sound like a platitude. It's just, it's the word. And, I want to stand upon that. So that's really solid.
And everybody, it looks different for everybody. And Ryan Holidays is doing a great job communicating the way the Stoics sat down and thought through this tension between things are probably going to be okay. They might get really bad, right?
Sure.
And always just living in that tension. I think for the last 10 or 15 years as a society, we've kind of all pushed into things are wonderful and they're just going to keep getting more wonderful. And now we're in a moment that nobody in a million years saw coming. And then it just parked the sucker, right? It's one of these black swan moments that Nassim Taleb talks about. And so here we are. Some people handle this with the 5,000 mindfulness apps that are you can get on your phone. Some people handle prayer and through Christian community. Yeah. But it's just finding a practice that helps you center, be here, and understand. Right?
Yes.
Just be in that moment, being able to exhale.
One of my favorite things that you have talked about that I heard you speak upon was secondary trauma. And I'd love to hear you speak to all the listeners today about secondary traumatic stress, because trauma is cumulative. And folks, I want you to know that it just builds upon one another. But I want to educate people about this subject even more, John.
I really appreciate this question, especially right. So I think a few things important to know about trauma. One is that you mentioned it, and that was a game changer for me. My friends, Steve and Lynn Jennings, they're in Amarillo, Texas. They researched trauma and secondary traumatic stress, and they put some thoughts together for me that I'd never heard before. One is that trauma is cumulative, and so most of us think you've got to be in a car wreck or witness somebody die to experience trauma or to be abused.
Yep.
Just watching the news every day puts a the way I describe it is you can either put a cinder block in your backpack or you can put a pebble in your backpack. And over time, that weight becomes the same, right?
Wow.
So cumulative trauma all day, every day may just be a pebble. You may just watch the news, another bad news story, bad news. Over time, your body starts to just do this, right? Look at a teacher who's been an elementary school teacher for 40 years. They walk different because they've just absorbed these children's traumas for years and years and years. And then trauma can be something that's proactively negative. Somebody hit you, somebody abused you, but can also be withholding of something good. And your brain registers that as trauma too. So having parents who never said I love you or never hugged you or never held you, your brain sets off alarms, relational alarms for that too. And then finally, like you mentioned, secondary traumatic stress. I can experience something with you telling me about what happened.
Yeah.
And that's where the news, the social media, this constant barrage of negativity can begin to impact our alarm systems and set them off, even though we're in a house with food and air conditioning and 2 kids and a wife that loves me, right? It's starting to set my alarms off because I'm just absorbing other people's trauma all day, every day. And so that's when being a true consumer of information in a way that you really protect your heart and your mind and your community around you is so critically important.
Yeah. Yeah.
It begins to affect you physiologically. It begins to mess with your amygdala, all parts of your brain. It just begins to set off every alarm you have and your hormonal response. And it's not even happening to you directly, right?
Okay, so it's really interesting what you just said there regarding the amygdala, because I've been talking to the listeners about this. We can grow the amygdala through the constant barrage of trauma, stress, anxiety, but then the amygdala can also shrink in its power, and it can then defer to the frontal cortex, where we're thinking more rationally, we're thinking creatively, etc. What people may have heard unintentionally through what you just said is, okay, that means I have to just avoid pain at all costs. I've got to keep myself out of scary situations. I've got to keep myself out of scary relationships. But there's a consequence to avoiding pain, and I'd love for you to speak to that.
No, and that's where we get back to joy and anxiety being on the same switch, right? The only beautiful things in life are love and relationship, and that means giving of myself to somebody else, giving somebody else my full self, and thereby giving them permission to hurt me too, right? So it's a balance. And there's a fear in that, there's a vulnerability in that. That's where the beauty of life is. So avoiding trauma, no. Like, you'll see me, if there's a fire, I'm running towards it. That's what gives me life, what gives me joy. And when people are struggling, I lean into that. What I do is not unnecessarily wrap my head around it. So one of the things when I was teaching graduate courses for counselors, I would tell them, don't listen to your clients all day and then go home and watch Law and Order SVU to go to sleep. Right? So if you're at home and suddenly you and your wife are working from home shoulder to shoulder, and it's getting uncomfortable, and oh, by the way, you're homeschool teachers now too for your 2 kids. Yeah. That's probably not a great time to also just keep the news running and the tickers going and telling you how everything's going to fall apart and we're all going to, right? Because you already have enough stress going on in your world, right? And it also means that I'm going to take a walk by myself, and I want you to take a walk by yourself. And hey, kids, I'm going to get you out of the house for a little while. So this morning when we made our plan, part of the plan is when I get home after this interview, I'm taking my kids for 1 hour and 30 minutes. I'm leaving the house.
So good.
And that's going to give my wife time to... And if she wanted to, she could turn the TV on, put a podcast in, and just fill her head with more noise. Yeah. Or she can take this time to breathe, go for a run, go relax, go through her prayer and journaling time, and just recenter herself. Like you mentioned earlier, just be present here. And so it's not about avoiding it all. In fact, I'm a big believer in leaning in as far as you can, but it's leaning into things that are real and leaning into things that are true and that build you up, not just noise and more drama.
That's good. I recently heard you say this: there is no external plug for an internal hole. Man, I love that. Spend some time on that. Yeah,
I think especially if you've got a childhood history of trauma, or if you've got relational challenges that you've experienced, we've just got a world of distraction at our fingertips these days. And so we are constantly running to the next drink or the next girlfriend or the next job after job after job. One of the things I used to tell people that work for me is the worst part about getting a new job is that you go with you, right?
Man, yeah.
You're going to show up there. The worst part about getting a new girlfriend is you're going to be at that date too. And so if we don't do the hard work of healing historical traumas and becoming okay with what we see in the mirror, we are never going to be able to present that other places. And I've just worked with so many folks over the years who said, I just need a girlfriend. I need a relationship that matters, and then I'll be whole. And I just, it's not going to end well. Or this job is going to be the one that helps me finally live into my passions, etc. And it's just not how that works, right? So when we go chasing for things other than owning ourselves from the inside out, and I know that sounds woo-woo and all cheeseball-y and whatnot. If you're a person of faith, that means really connecting to this one central idea that, above all, I am loved.
Yep.
And when you can know that from the inside, man, you project that all over the place, and you're not chasing, fish hooks and bait everywhere, trying to make yourself, that's going to be the one, that's going to be the one, that's going to be the one.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not a person of faith, it's finding the center that you are valuable and that you are worthy. And once you can anchor into that, then you can rappel off and have all kinds of adventures in the world because you're centered and whole.
Ah, that's so good. It's quite obvious we're all at home right now, and it's kind of scary to stare at ourselves all day long. But there's a huge opportunity in this. I really believe that chaos can breed creativity and innovation. I'd love to hear some tactics that we could all employ today, like right now, today, to look at life differently so that we can employ growth strategies in order to grow up from the inside out. Because coming out of this, turning the page, the world is going to need emotionally mature people, people who have perseverance, people who are innovative in thought and who don't cave to fear and shame.
So I think there's a fine line between what I would say is caving to fear and shame, running from it, and sitting down with a journal and a pen and acknowledging it, that I've got 2 PhDs, I make a great salary, I've got 2 healthy kids, I've got a wife, I've got a home in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm scared because I don't know what tomorrow will look like. Yeah. And that's not me cowering to fear, that's me being honest and me owning it and accepting it. I think the number one plan right now is to make a plan. Yeah. And here's why. Our brains equate familiar with safety. And that's why people will stay in abusive relationships. They'll work for terrible bosses because it's familiar. And the discomfort of change sets our alarms off. So it's just easier to keep taking it because we know what's coming, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality is that's out the window. And so the faster we can get a plan and get some sort of routine back in our lives, the more our brains and our bodies will begin to start to get a sense of normalcy and safety. That's not going to pay your rent if you just got laid off. That's not going to pay your electric bill if you're about to get furloughed. Those are real. And so making a plan of what's your financial position, how much do you need to put food on your table and not lose your apartment. Yep. This bailout money, that's not going to save you. That's going to kick that soccer ball part of a yard over, right? That's not going to get you down the street. And so really making a plan and saying, here's what I can control today. Yep. And writing that down. And there's something about writing your fears down that really makes them more real and often a lot less scary. Right? A lot less. And then after you have a plan, then you go after it. You start making it happen. So just yesterday, I kicked off another morning routine that I'm going to stick to for the next foreseeable future, because that's what I can control. I can control my thoughts and I can control my actions. And that's it. That's it on the whole wide world. And so I'm going to make a plan that's going to take back my thoughts, back my actions, and we're going to go from there. That's something I would do today. And then the second thing I would do is make yourself connect. However awkward it is, however weird it is, however dumb you feel, connect. Call your mom, call your dad, call your old college roommate, Skype with their kids, call your church small group. My wife put together and some moms put together my 4-year-old daughter's Easter party via Zoom the other day. Wow. And it was a train wreck. Chris. It was just chaos and mayhem, but it was beautiful. It didn't really work, and they were waving their arms. But it was awesome, and they're connecting in really neat ways that I've never seen happen before. So, connect. So make a plan and connect. Those are the 2 things I would tell your listeners to do right after clicking off of this podcast.
That's so good. John, anything else? I just value you so much. I value your wisdom, and I just want to give platform for it. Is there anything else that you'd just like to share? Anything else we haven't talked about or I haven't considered that would be a benefit to the listeners and viewers today?
I feel like I just keep saying it over and over in all the interviews I'm doing, but whatever you're feeling is okay. I heard Brene Brown say this the other day. This is all of our first pandemic, and so we all get some grace on this one, right? And so this is my first pandemic as a dad. This is my first pandemic as a Dave Ramsey personality, and so on and so forth. My first pandemic as a husband. So I'm going to give myself some grace. I'm going to give grace to the people in my life. Yeah. Somebody sends some mean Instagram thing, I'm going to let it roll because they're scared. People are scared. They're nervous. They're uncomfortable. And then the other reality is the fear is real. Right? You might lose your job. We don't know what the stock market's going to do tomorrow, the next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks. We don't know how serious the medical condition is or is not. Lots of uncertainty.
Yes.
And so whatever you're feeling, it's real. Own it, write it down, and then begin making a plan for the steps to live in what tomorrow needs. And I just want to keep saying that over and over. Your feelings are valid and they're okay. And then let's make positive steps towards what tomorrow's going to look like.
So powerful, folks. He is Dr. John Delony, a Ramsey personality. I'm so proud of you, man. I'd love for people to stay connected with you as you're building this this new platform and opportunity to add value to people. How can everyone connect with you?
I just yesterday, I think I downloaded Instagram on my phone, so we're figuring out as we go here.
Yes.
At John Delony.
We're gonna do it right now.
There's a team of people here that's helping me dragging me into the 21st century. So we're having a lot of fun here, but. At John Delony, Delony, and that's where you can find me and the posts. And we're the Ramsey folks are about to crank out a series of messages of hope.
Yeah.
Whether it's for your money, whether it's for your mental health and wellness, whether it's for jobs going on. So there's some really remarkable series. It started last week and it's starting every night this week. I think it's starting tonight at 7. Is my good friend Rachel Cruz will start at 7 o'clock tonight.
Yeah.
And there'll be one every night this week. And then if you go to daveramsey.com/hope, dude, I'll tell you what, I've been here for a few months and seeing behind closed doors, when this thing started getting rolling and getting messy out there in the world, this company circled the wagons and said, how can we start serving people? And so they're giving away Financial Peace University for free for a few weeks. They're giving away books, and they are discounting them so obnoxiously that they're basically giving them away. They are doing whatever they can to help people serve themselves, their communities out in this really wild time. And so it's neat to be a part of a community and to take a paycheck from somebody that you really believe in. And but I would encourage your folks to check into these messages of hope. They're incredible.
Yes.
I filmed mine this morning. I hope the editors are good, man, because we had to do a lot of takes, but I'm still learning what I'm doing over here. But the messages of hope are really remarkable, and it's just a candle in a dark place, man, will shine a lot of light, right?
That's truth. That's truth. Guys, go follow him right now. John Delony on Instagram. I just did it. Followed you. Got you. This is awesome.
Thank you.
I'm just proud of you. I really just... Hey, no, man, you're good. You're growing quickly.
Yeah. We're getting there.
Thanks a bunch for having the conversation. I love Ramsey Solutions. And all of you.
Appreciate you, Chris. We love you too, man.